In the previous lectures, I've been talking about just contraction analysis of just a single RNN. But now I want to see what happens when we have a couple of RNNs. For example, one of them is just prefrontal cortex, another one is hippocampus, amygdala, and many other regions. I want to see the interaction between them. Because we want to know what happens, for example, if this RNN is stable and all of these RNNs are stable, what are the conditions that proves that the overall system is stable or has contraction? What are the conditions? So in general, it means that it is not true. But you see in some papers that they say it is convergence, and so it's a misinformation. And I want to explain this important article from Google AI in 2022. Also, this article is very interesting. If you like to know about neural circuits, it's very interesting. So the motivation is that experimental neuroscience has moved in direction of studying multiple interacting areas, and RNN theory needs to be likewise extended. We take a constructive approach towards this problem, leveraging tools from nonlinear control theory and machine learning to characterize when combinations of stable RNNs will themselves be stable. Importantly, we derive conditions which allow for massive feedback connections between interacting recurrent neural networks. So, for example, we have, visual cortex, we model it with RNN, prefrontal cortex, we model it with RNN, and we want to see what happens with the interactions. And nowadays, in 2023, we can definitely work on multi-area recordings using different techniques in neurobiology, neuroscience, that we can simultaneously, it's very important to emphasize on this, that these recordings are simultaneous and it is multi-area. And so there is no problem to validate our mathematical models. The conditions under which single autonomous RNN are chaotic or stable are well studied, in particular when RNN weights are randomly chosen and the number of neurons tends to infinity. However, there is very little work addressing the theoretical question of stability in RNN of RNN. Two facts make the question challenging. Connecting two stable systems does not, in general, leads to stable overall system. This is true even for linear systems. If you have two linear systems, L1 and L2, and both of them are stable, there is no guarantee that 100% of the overall system is stable. We focus on a special type of stability known as contractive stability. A contracting system is a system that forgets initial conditions. For example, if it has this trajectory, then the other initial condition eventually converges to this, so that the distance between them gets reduced until it becomes zero, almost zero. Or like this, that I was explaining. So it's very important to understand our brain needs hierarchical things, as well as recurrent things. So there is feedback, so it has internal memory and it has a feedback. It's like a dynamical system. And if you combine the hierarchical model with the recurrent neural networks, you can almost model your brain, at least approximate it. I'm very ignorant if I say we can model the brain. It's very complex. If you combine epigenetics, neuroevolution, and those things. For example, I'm fascinated by the fact that neuromodulators, which is a kind of neurotransmitter, which is very different from neurotransmitter, because they even change the ion channels. They change the structure. And if you combine them with these models, you can see, because each neuron inside your brain has a different, there is a different gene expression inside each of those cells, depending on the location, and that generates a different kind of neurotransmitter. And so that's why it's very complicated. There are three contributions: a novel parametrization of feedback combination of contracting recurrent neural networks that enables direct optimization, a novel contraction for continuous time to use in conjunction with combination condition. So you can think about it as a Lyapunov function. We have a general value of energy function, and that because the derivative is like this, it becomes an exponential stability. And in the previous lectures, I was talking about these recurrent neural networks. So just one recurrent neural networks. But now we want to generalize it. Now we have, for example, the first recurrent neural networks has n sub I number of neurons, and another recurrent neural network has n sub j number of neurons. And I want to see what happens during this interaction. And this L goes from Ni to Nj. So consider it just as a bipartite graph. And you want to see what happens to this interaction. Let's review what we have done in the previous lectures. Of course, here we can see that in the simplest case, where all RNN modules are contracting in this identity metric, the negative feedback becomes this. And if Lij is parameterized like this, then we can say that we can define it like this. You know about local contraction, so this theorem talks about absolute value restricted weights. And if there exist positive diagonal matrices P1 and P2, so if these diagonal matrices exist as well as Q is positive, such that W is like this, then the standard recurrent neural network is contracting in metric M. So you can define your metric as M. So these are the things that we have discussed in the previous lectures, and one is contracting in diagonal matrix. If there exists a positive diagonal matrix P, this P, then one is contracting. This one, it means that recurrent neural networks, single recurrent neural networks. But if let D be a positive diagonal matrix and P be an arbitrary positive diagonal, then one is contracting in metric D. So these are for the things that we knew. We knew that. And so if there exists a positive definite diagonal matrices, this W, we can say that our metric is like this. And we can generalize this for the case of recurrent neural networks by these theorems that is described in this slide. And you can see the rest of the paper. I don't have enough slides, but it's all generalizing the contraction for one RNN for the case of multiple RNNs, and it's very interesting.